Thank you, Julia and Teresa. You've set me up well to explain my part. So thank you, Luca, also for putting up the timeline. That's very helpful. So as Julia mentioned, my job today is to tell you a bit about what it is we actually do in the working groups. And so I would say there are two broad big things we do. One is the policy process that Julia had mentioned, and then there's a kind of umbrella of other things. So I'll start with those umbrella of other things and then really dig down into the policy process. So in terms of other things, our big task, one of our big tasks, and hopefully this won't be our task forever, but it is our task right now, is to make sure that youth are included in all processes, conversations, and discussions at the CFS itself, as well as in the CSM. We would hope that this would happen just normally, but it is still a struggle for us to make sure our voices are heard, that our perspectives are shared, and that we are invited to the table. And I think more important than just being heard, one of our struggles that we're working towards, and one of the main things we do, is demand that we're not just heard, but that we're part of decision-making processes, that we are directing those processes, especially when they concern youth. So that is one thing that we're kind of constantly struggling to do. Another part of this big umbrella is to challenge narratives about youth at the CFS, and to ensure that our perspectives about youth are on the table just as much, if not more, than private sector narratives. And we'll have a couple speakers talk about that challenge later, but that's a kind of active thing that we're constantly doing. And in order to ensure our voice and narratives are part of the conversation, we organize events at the CFS that are outside of the policy process. And you'll hear some from my colleagues and friends about things we've organized in the past, but they can be public events where we invite the private sector and governments. They can be online events, and they can just be meetings where we meet with people and try and convey our perspective. And then the last kind of umbrella thing that we do is we meet regularly as a working group through the magic of Zoom to share and build community, to have solidarity with each other, and to engage in collective learning about our various struggles and how we might support each other. So now to the meat of what I'm supposed to discuss, which is the policy process. So as Julia has already described, one of the big things the CFS does is produce, through participatory processes, policy documents on certain areas. And every 4 years, governments, civil society, and all the other stakeholders at the CFS get to participate in deciding what those policy processes will be. This is an agenda setting. If you hear the term MyPow in conversations, one of the many acronyms you might be forced to learn in this space, that's the kind of broad policy making. And so we fought as youth. Thank you, Teresa, for putting the acronym in the chat. I'm going to try and not use any acronyms, but MyPow is the agenda setting document. And we fought, as you'll hear from my colleagues later as well, to have a youth policy process at the CFS. We did not get to decide the name of the process, but the name has been decided as Promoting Youth Engagement and Employment in Agriculture and Food Systems. So once the CFS decides that they'll begin a policy work stream, the most common next step is to have what's called the high-level panel of experts, which is a kind of independent body of both academics, but also people working at grassroots levels to put together a report. And we were able to have some of our youth members apply for positions on that HLPE, and we do have one friend of the CSM youth working on that report. So the high-level panel of experts will have consultations to figure out what they'll include in the report. And they do research on kind of the state of youth in agriculture, the challenges faced by youth in agriculture and in the food systems, and they make a preliminary kind of set of policy recommendations. So they sent out in January of this year a call to anybody to provide them some guidance on what the scope of the HLP, the high-level panel of experts report should be. And we as a youth working group spent quite some time kind of putting together our key ideas about what the scope of this report should be. And we produced a document which I believe Anissa has now put into the chat. And in this, we addressed a number of questions that the high-level panel of experts had put to us, such as, I'll just read you two of them. How do the evolution and transitions of agriculture, food systems, and nutrition affect youth engagement and employment? What governance transformations are necessary to enable and encourage youth participation in agriculture and food systems? So we put together a document which you can see that kind of details our perspective about what the scope of this report should be. At some point, hopefully next month, the panel will release what's called a zero draft, a very first draft of their report, and we will be able to submit comments on that. So anybody who's interested in being involved in commenting on that document, we will be delighted to work with you on putting together some comments. The reports aren't always as good as we hope they can be, and so our job through our comments is to really push and have them reflect our perspectives. So then once we have a high-level panel of experts' final report, then the real political negotiations begin. What will happen first is that a chair will be selected to coordinate what's called an open-ended working group to push the policy process along. And most likely, the chair and maybe friends of the chair will put together a first draft of the policy document. And the policy document, again, may not be something we like. The document generally will lay out recommendations for states, for international organizations, even for social movements, about what kind of steps they should take in law and in policy to support a youth engagement in agriculture and food systems. The report, their first set of recommendations may not address human rights in any substantive way. They might also not deal with topics that are important to us. They might just talk about increasing technology in rural areas and not mention anything about radical agrarian reform, about human rights and peasants' rights to land, to seed, to water. They might not mention anything about decolonizing food systems or addressing systemic racism in food systems or anything about food sovereignty. So then it will be our job to participate in processes and try and redirect what those policy recommendations are. And we'll be able to do this in a number of ways. So first, we'll again be able to draft comments and written submissions that will go to the chair expressing our concerns and our recommendations of what should be in the report. Second, we'll be able to attend these meetings of the open-ended working group where the text will be negotiated, and we will be able to make oral submissions about what we think should be in the document. and in the policy recommendations. And then third, we'll be able to meet with governments on a, what we say, bilateral basis, just us and one or two governments at a time, to kind of share our views about what should be in the document and try to get them to agree with us and support us in the process. Those are the three kind of traditional ways in which we engage in the policy process, but I think we're an inventive group, and I wouldn't be surprised if we come up with other ways in which we can intervene and express our opinions about what should be in the process. I'm 1 minute left, which is great because I only have 1 minute left to do. I think it's really, who knows what the process will actually look like in terms of our participation, because none of us know what's going to happen with COVID-19. It might be that most of this process happens online, or it might be that these meetings happen in person. Either way, we will work to ensure anybody who wants to be involved is involved. And in some ways, being online, despite all the challenges Nasmeen has already articulated, provides opportunity for more of us to be engaged. But again, let's see what happens with COVID-19. And then finally, we expect the policy document to be adopted in October 2022. While we'll get a chance to participate in all the negotiations, we will not be voting on the adoption of the policy process. That will be up to governments. And then once it's adopted, it's up to us to see how we use it, how we bring, as Julia already said, Rome home. So that's the policy process. I'll just add one quick note, which is the CSM is developing a facilitation guide and also a set of policy or a set of recommendations for how to engage in online consultations. And we'll make sure, oh, there's the guide to facilitation that's being shared, but we're advocating now with other working groups to figure out the best ways to ensure participation online. And so that's an ongoing project of the CSM. And if you're interested in being involved, a few as well. So that's it for me. And I think I'll pass it off to Anissa, who's moderating this session. And I'm sorry if all of these details are confusing, but they make sense as we go through them. So thank you, everyone.